So this is where I left it off in the last one. The bottom cabinet is built, all the joinery is done. The upper cabinet, all the internals are done. The front curve is cut in, and the joinery between the two cabinets is complete. And this is knocked down, so this top can come off and be basically carried through the front door to get set up. So all that's done. So my attention now needs to focus on the legs. That's the next step, is to get the legs built. I've already gone and glued up the leg blanks, and they just need to be milled down, at least along the sides, to get some nice clean edges that I can work with. And then after that, I need to cut in some joinery, and then I'll eventually cut the curves. But that's what I'm going to focus on now, is the legs. And after the legs are built, I'll worry about how they're going to be attached here. This is also going to be knocked down joinery. I need to be able to take those legs off. So I've got a couple things in mind there that I'll get to, but first you got to build the legs. All right, so my leg blanks are squared back up. When I glued them up, I did not double up the thickness up here because I knew I was going to be taking it off. I essentially want the corner of the desk to rest in this corner right here. So there was no reason to waste the material that would go up here, only to have to, to come back and cut it back out. However, that doesn't mean that this is square, and I knew it wouldn't be. Gluing it together, nothing's ever perfect, so I had to clean up both edges, and that means that this is slightly out of square. I did test it. It's actually better than I thought it was going to be, but it is out of square. So I have my ripping blade set up in here, and then I've raised it to where it's just shy of kissing the bottom of this. So I may have to clean it up a little bit with a hand plane, but it'll square that corner back up, and then I can cut everything else to the proper lengths.
The reason for using the ripping blade here is simply that blade has a flat tooth profile, so it'll leave a pretty clean edge on it. Still have to clean it up with hand planes, but what I start out with is going to be much better than if I had used an alternating bevel blade. I had to cut the legs to their proper length in 2 steps. First, by measuring the distance from that shoulder I just created down to the bottom and cutting to a very specific height that I want the desktop to sit at. Once that was cut, I could turn the piece around and cut it to its final length, or final height. Next I moved on to marking out the position of the stretcher that's going to go between the 2 legs. I ganged them together here so that I can make sure that I've got the same mark on both legs, and then I could then turn around and transfer that down to the sides. Now these are center marks that I'm going to use, which is important for the loose tenon joinery. I also need to cut the center stretcher to its final length, and then also mark it out for the same joinery. For the joinery, I'm actually going to be cutting a double mortise and tenon on each side using my shop-made slot mortiser. Now this could easily be done with a domino or more traditional mortise and tenon joinery. I wanted the double tenon because it will actually give twice the surface area when gluing up compared to one larger tenon. Cutting that joinery out on this machine is pretty simple. I can cut one, flip the piece over, and then cut the second piece, and then matching mortises are cut into the stretcher. Again, running it once against the blade, flipping it essentially upside down so that mortise is now facing up, and then cutting a second mortise in. And this is the end result.
All right, so in front of me I have a pattern that I'm making for the legs so that I can get the curves cut into it. So here's my center line, and this represents where the center stretcher is between the 2 legs, and it's 4 inches wide. This is 5 inches wide that I've marked out here. So I want to be careful not to make any cuts that are going to come into here. So all of this on this side is kind of going to be a joinery zone where I don't want to touch that. So this is the outside of the leg, this is the inside of the leg. The curves come in along the outside, and then we'll kind of bow in here. So this is going to remain, but this side is going to get cut out, and these ends are going to get cut out. So on the outside, my curve is going to come in 1.5 inches. Let me turn this around so you can see. So I've got the center line marked on my drawing bow, and I'll use that there, and I just need to tighten this up until it gets to the radius that I want. And I found that just tightening it up a little bit goes a long way. I just tighten it up just a touch and it's too much. Okay, and then the idea, I'll flip it over again so that you can see the inside here, is that I will still center that curve, but I'm going to come out past where I would be cutting into that safe zone there, that do not cut mark. So essentially I need to cut all this away and out here, and that will be my leg.
One important note here is that while marking out one leg, you can see the orientation of the pattern here. To mark out the other leg, that pattern actually has to be flipped. So what's now facing the camera would be on the far side. They need to be mirror images of each other when they're cut.
Okay, so the legs are rough cut, but they still need their final shaping. And I've got the leg assembly dry assembled so that I can shape the inner stretcher. As you can see, it's pretty oversized for what it's gonna end up looking like. This is still 4 inches across, whereas at this point with those curves in it, they're only at 2.5 inches. So I do have a template here so that I can make sure I pattern it the same. I'm gonna again find my center line. And then I'm going to come in 1 inch, and then I'll base my curve off of that. There we go. It's pretty close. It doesn't have to be exact because the only reason it's set at 1 inch is because I decided to set it at 1 inch. So if that works out being 7/8, then that's fine, right? I'm looking for the overall look of it. The other decision I need to make is on the corner here, do I let it come straight into there or do I want to change that curve a little bit? But I think I like it like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out, I will shape the pattern, and then I'll use it for both top and bottom of this piece. If you watched any of my videos before, you've probably seen that when I do curves like this and repeated pieces, a lot of times I'll take, like I did with the separators between the top and the bottom cabinets, and take them over and use the pattern routing bit at the router table. I'm not going to do that on these ones. I'm going to take these over to the oscillating spindle sander and do them that way. Reason being is two things. Number one, the thickness of the pieces. the bit size is going to be pretty big, and I don't have one that big. And you combine that with the steepness of these cuts, and that means I can only cut on the downhill, or I'm really going to risk tearing out this grain or having the piece go flying across the shop, which has happened to me before. Take a look at this. So I don't want to do that. So using a smaller bit would mean I'm not coming up all the way, and then I'd have to raise the bit, and then I'd have to flip it over to get the other side so that I can do it the other direction. And it would just be, it'd be doable, but it'd be a giant pain in the ass. I've got another way of doing this. It doesn't matter if I'm a hair off between left and right, it'll be fine. I've got the pattern to compare it to, and I'll just bring it down to that. I just, for safety reasons, I don't want to do this at the router table. Because now I have to make this knockdown, I need to make these legs removable. So they're going to be held on the inside with a couple of bolts in each leg. But I also want to do a little something else to support this more and to prevent any kind of racking should this be leaned against. So what I'm going to do is install another block that of course will be shaped to match the profile of the leg, and I'll probably only come down about 2 inches. And on the top of that piece, I'm going to use a floating tenon which will lock in on the underside of the bottom here. But I need to bring it in a little bit to get it away from these dovetails. So that means I'm going to have to bring that leg out a little bit there. It'll be shaped and rounded over so that it looks good. But I am going to bring that in a little bit more just to add a little bit more security and a little bit, just to make it a little bit more sturdy. Before I do that, however, I'm going to address some of the roundovers that are going on these legs because it will be hard to get to these bottom ones once that extra piece is on there. So I'll mark it out how far down it's going to come and just bring the roundovers up just a little bit shy of that, but I'll get all the other ones. Okay, let me explain what I'm doing here real quick. This isn't as complicated as it looks. I've got these right angle brackets on here clamped down just so I have a good registration surface with what will be the bottom of the desk. I also have the center of my mortise marked all the way around this piece so that I can align it with a spot I've already marked on the legs that puts that roughly in the center up here so that I'll be able to find that easily once I get the glue on there. And I've got the same over here.
These blocks as they're installed are pretty oversized and you can see how far they're sticking out. It's an easy matter though of rough cutting the excess off at the bandsaw and then flush trimming that over at the router table. After everything's trimmed up, the next step is to add the roundovers to those blocks, as well as to clean up the transition between the leg and where it's coming up into that block. This is best done by hand. There's really no way to get a router bit in there, so it just has to be transitioned. What I'm using there is just a piece of 120 grit sandpaper on a wood backer. Works really well. The next step is to get the mortises cut on the bottom side of the desktop assembly, and this is done by first positioning the legs and then transferring over the center marks from my mortises that are on those support blocks. Once the center lines are established, the rest of the mortise can be marked out. I'll be using a plunge router to cut these mortises by hand, and I'm going to do that in 2 passes. First, a shallow pass to establish the overall size of the mortise, and then a final pass at its full depth. Both the front and back mortises will also be cut a little bit oversized to allow for the expansion and contraction of the wood of the upper case assembly. I'll use a template to drill some pilot holes that will run both through the side of the case and into the leg so that I have some accuracy in the holes that will transfer through for the bolts that are going to hold these legs in place. And just like the mortises on the bottom of the case, the bolt holes through the side will also be elongated to allow for wood movement. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. As a reminder, this build series is going to be available on simplecove.com in the guild section, and that will include access to the plans I used to build the desk. I hope you'll come back for part 7 of this video series. In that video, I'm going to be assembling and finally gluing up both the upper and lower cases, and I'm going to go through everything that I need to do to clean up those small mistakes in the dovetails.